Howdy folks, welcome back to Thunder Mesa Studio. My name is Dave. Today I want to share with you some plans and some progress on an On30 mini layout that will bring back some old models in a brand new way. Those of you who have been in the hobby for a while may well remember my friend Verne Niner. Verne was the mastermind behind the remarkable and groundbreaking On30 Estrella and Sonora Grande layout. The layout was well documented in the hobby press and online, and a lot of us have very fond memories of the stories that he would weave around this fictional borderlands locale, this mining empire that was somewhere on the border between Arizona and Mexico. Verne was also very generous with his knowledge and his time, and he was always happy to offer his advice and expertise to anyone who asked. And, I learned quite a bit from him myself. Sadly, Verne passed away some years ago. But before he left us, he designated me as caretaker for his award-winning San Lorenzo diorama. Now, the diorama had been an important part of the Estrella and Sonora Grande layout. And once I got it, it became an important part of the Thunder Mesa layout, this wonderful collection of structures made for a great scene. And for years on the Thunder Mesa layout, this represented the old Spanish part of town, which I called Zocalo Plaza. With the recent dismantling and reimagining of the Thunder Mesa layout, San Lorenzo has existed in a state of limbo. Originally, my plan had been to reincorporate the pieces of the diorama back into the new layout. But now, as things are progressing, I'm beginning to second guess that idea a little bit. Though the mission and the other structures work great as part of the larger layout, I'm beginning to think the scene might be better served as part of a standalone mini layout. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first being that Verne himself intended it as a diorama, a standalone scene that tells its own story. But the second and probably more important reason is that I would like to keep all of these wonderful models together in a single unit that can continue to exist even after I'm gone. Now, I intend to live forever, of course, but God forbid something should happen to me. I think the diorama would stand a better chance of surviving intact if it wasn't just another part of the Thunder Mesa layout that was going to be, parted out on eBay. So with those considerations in mind, I began to dream up a little San Lorenzo mini layout. I want something that will showcase Verne's wonderful modeling skills, the color palette, the style, his sense of humor, while adding some kinetic energy with the movement of trains. Sadly, I can't produce anything close to the original ENSG in the space I have, but I do think I can recapture a little bit of the old layout's flavor. So let's head back into the train room now and see what we have to work with. And here we have all of the elements of the original San Lorenzo diorama. Well, almost all of them, everything that I could save. Had to get rid of the base. That was some white foam beadboard, and it didn't really survive once I started pulling the structures off to put them on the Thunder Mesa layout. But that's no big loss. If you've ever worked with white beadboard, you know what I mean. So we have the original 5 structures here, as close as I can get them to that original configuration, plus the fountain, which is scratch built. These 4 structures were from Thomas York kits, I believe, originally, while the mission itself was scratch built mostly out of floral foam and some architectural details, little bits of molding here and there, and stuff from the jewelry making department of the hobby store. A lot of the figures, all of the figures from the original diorama are here, plus a couple extra that I've added. These guys, including the statue here of El Macho, are from Knuckle Duster Miniatures. These are wonderful white metal castings. The cowboys on horseback. These are from Aspen Model Company. Just fantastic. This is a princess figure used in tabletop gaming that Verne painted up to look like a señorita. This is the Padre from Woodland Scenics California Mission set. all kinds of stuff. These are the original trees that Verne made using some, this is some stuff from Scenic Express on some, looks like cottonwood branches. He's got these scratch-built saguaro cacti. There's, I think, 4 of these altogether. And these were made from Sculpey using Travis Hanchug's wonderful technique that he was kind enough to share with both of us. So there's the basic scene. I've laid it out as close to the original diorama as I can figure, looking at photos. This base is just a half-inch sheet of plywood that's 24 by 48 inches, and it's been screwed down on top of a frame built of 1x3s. Anybody could make this. This is actually part of the old staging yard from the old Thunder Mesa layout before it was dismantled and moved here. I'm going to repurpose this particular section as a new mini layout. I like this size, 2 by 4 feet. Fits nicely in the back of my van. One person can pick it up and move it without help. So I think that's what we're going to go with. I've got some micro engineering flex track. This is code 83 flex track and a turnout or 2. Not sure how many turnouts I'm going to have on this mini layout. Not a lot of operations on these. It's mostly just, roundy. But I wanted to use the micro engineering code 83 because that's what Verne used on the Estrella Sonora Grande. Right now, this is just sitting on top of some shop shelves, but I'll probably be building a better stand for it, probably something with wheels on it. And since I have the structures in close to the correct position, as close as I could figure by looking at photographs, I'm going to trace them in place now. I'm going to trace the outlines of all of them. I'm not going to draw an elaborate track plan for this. There's really no point since it's just a very simple oval. So I'm going to trace these out, and then I'll take everything off and we'll draw the track plan directly onto the plywood. Now I have a straight edge and a bar compass, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw my track plan right on top of this. I'm going to come in 2 inches from the edge so that the tracks will be, track line centers will be 2 inches in from the edge of the layout. I'm going to use some foam rock scenery around the edges so it'll actually hang out a little bit more than that, maybe another inch. So draw this line first. Let's go straight across the front of the layout. I'll use my bar compass. I think we want, I think we're going to have just a 10-inch radius curve here. Pretty tight, but only really going to be running porters on this. Little short wheelbase locomotives, which is what Verne mostly ran too, even on his bigger layout, and they do just fine. On they'll go down to, gosh, I've seen them down to 6-inch radius. The problem is not so much will they negotiate it; it's the coupler swing at that tight of a radius. The coupler swing on longer pieces of equipment will tend to push it off the tracks. But as long as you keep the locomotive small and the rolling stock short, small, you shouldn't have any problem. Take this and we'll measure 10-inch radius. Adjust that to right there using my straight edge. And we'll come in 2 inches. So right at 12 inches is where the center of that curve should be. On there. And then the other down at this end. Notice there's some holes drilled into this board, and that's from when this was part of the old staging yard for the wiring and other wiring and electronics to go through. Shouldn't present any problem here though. I think I want to add a switch right here. I'm going to use the switch itself as a template. This is a micro engineering right hand number 6, I believe. And I'm going to come out parallel to the side of the market here. Curve that ever so slightly. Have a little siding here, so we'll have some semblance of operability. Not much though. Kind of like the Bandit Canyon, about the same level operations potential. I'll readjust my bar compass out to 11 inches because that's the track center line. And I'm going to cut this out, or parts of it out. I don't really need, I don't have to. I could just build it right on top of this tabletop like this. That would be easier. Wouldn't necessarily be better, but it would be easier. I'm not going to cut the entire roadbed out. Just parts of it. So, and that'll lighten this up quite a bit. So there'll be enough there for it to be, structurally sound, but you don't need a whole big flat table. Most of the world is not flat, so big flat tabletops are usually not very realistic, at least not out here in the West. So I mark out an inch that way, and we'll bring this down to 9 inches, and we'll mark the inside of that. Now I'll do the same thing on the other side. I think I'm going to want the town to be up a little higher, maybe like an inch higher than the track level. So that'll probably be on a piece of foam. I'm just thinking out loud here. But I want to have something to support it so that the foam will sit down on top of the plywood, even though this is all going to be cut out. Okay, so I've measured in about 3 inches right here. And this is just going to give me a lip for the foam. Polystyrene foam will sit on top of that. So the central part will be cut away, and so I have a little foam hill here, and that's where the town's going to sit, a little rise above the track level, just to make it more visually interesting. Kind of watching me design this in real time. Like that. One improvement, I guess, I'm making over the original diorama is that all the structures have lights now. I added lights to all of them when I added them to the Thunder Mesa layout, so it's going to be a lot easier to go down through that foam to wire those lights than it would be, to go through foam and then drill through plywood and all that. Now that I've got that pretty well figured out, I'm going to mark my cut lines with a Sharpie. Just makes it less confusing for when I have a saw in my hand. None of these cuts are, mission critical. I mess them up a little, as long as I don't, mess up really bad and, cut out the track center line or something. Really doesn't make that much of a difference. I could build this entire, deck out of foam if I wanted to. I've done that before. I did it on the Gruesome Gulch. But I found that I do like the strength that you get under the track with the plywood, the rigidity of it. Just a personal preference on my part. This might be a little bridge over on this side. I'm going to cut out a bunch of this material. I have room for a little arroyo there or something. And that is all ready to be cut out now. Now I'm going to take all this home to my garage and do the cutting there. Take the deck off and cut it all out. I don't want to do it in here because I don't want to get sawdust all over everything, all the models and the layouts that are here. So just load it in the van and we'll take it home. So the first thing I need to do is remove the plywood top from this box frame by backing out all of these drywall screws. taking a closer look at this box frame, you can see that when I originally built this, I put some 2x2 blocks in the corners, in all four corners. And that's just a quick and dirty way to make these butt joints a little bit stronger. Where I'm just going into the end grain with these screws. That's not the strongest joint in the world, so those 2x2s strengthen up the corners quite a bit. Now, the only real modifications I want to make to this box frame is I'm going to add some additional bracing underneath with some 1x3s. And that's, it doesn't really need that for strength. These are more to help support it on the stand that I'm eventually going to build for it. So we'll come in about 16 inches from each end here on center. And I'm putting all this together once again with some 1 1/4 inch coarse thread drywall screws. There we go. I'm about ready to cut this roadbed out. But when you have something like this where you've got this inside piece to cut out and then this outside piece, I'm going to cut the inside out first because that's going to make it less wobbly when I go around to cut out the outside. Now, since this is kind of landlocked here, so to speak, in other words, I don't have a place to get the saw in, I'm going to drill a hole here so I can get the jigsaw blade down in there and cut this out. Well, you might have noticed that about halfway through that cut, the saw magically changed colors. And that's because my good old trusty Black & Decker that I've had for, 25, 30 years, finally decided that this was the day that it didn't want to work anymore. So it gave up the ghost. So I had to run down to Harbor Freight and get a new one. This one works pretty good. I'm not sure I like it as much as the old Black & Decker, though. It's, a lot of nostalgia there. But it'll do the job. Now this is going to go on here, but I want to elevate it up above the box frame a few inches, so time to cut some risers. I want the roadbed to be elevated about 3 inches above the box frame. So I'm going to cut some 1x3 risers, and I'm going to cut all of these the same, about 5.5 inches, which give me some room for some foam scenery down below track level. There's no grades on the layout, so these are all going to be the same size. If there was any kind of grade, then I would have to do the calculations for that and cut the risers accordingly. So I just cut one to the length, and then I use that as a master pattern for all the rest of them. So they'll all be the same length. I should call this layout the Recycled Express because everything on here is recycled lumber. Earlier projects, other layouts. Now, using the roadbed to properly align everything, I've got all the risers clamped into place in the proper positions, and now I can just go ahead and drill some holes and use a couple of drywall screws to hold them on. You know, I've used drywall screws for this task, and also used carpentry screws, construction screws, wood screws, and let me tell you, they all work. Whenever I do a bit of construction like this, somebody in the comments is invariably going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't use drywall screws. You should use, construction wood screws, blah, blah, blah." And I've used those in the past, and I'll probably use them again. But right now, I have a ton of drywall screws on hand. And as somebody else once said in the comments, and I love this, the wood doesn't know or care what kind of screws you're using, as long as they hold. Doesn't care what the screws are called. And seeing as how I've used a lot of these screws again and again on multiple projects, I think they're pretty durable. Well, now I'm ready to attach the roadbed to the risers, and I'll just drive a couple of drywall screws down through the top here. But I want to make sure it's properly aligned. And the reason I cut this the way I did, leaving these, squared off pieces like that in some places, especially on the corners, and so I could go around and, just use a piece of wood like this and make sure that everything lines up properly with the corners and the sides, so it's on here square. You know what I mean? It's not mission critical, but it is nice to have everything be as square as possible. It actually looks pretty good. I can come back just a smidge there. Yeah. See if I can get away with not countersinking these. The only place I would really need to is where there, where there's going to be track. But I think I can just torque these down in here without too much trouble. Yeah, there we go. As long as I get it down below the top of the plywood, we're in good shape. And these should be the last two screws. I actually ended up going with 8 risers altogether rather than 6 to make it a little bit sturdier. This curve got pretty split and chewed up when I was cutting out the roadbed, and I plan to put a lowboy trestle right here. So I think I'm just going to go ahead, now that everything is solid and in place, I'm going to go ahead and just cut this piece of plywood out, and I'll just lay flex track across the gap. That's about got it. There's one last bit of carpentry I want to do while I've still got it here in the garage. I'm going to take my power sander and go around and kind of round off the edge of the plywood here to give it sort of a chamfered edge, and that will help it to blend a little bit better into the rock work that's going to be down below when I do that. Well, that should do it for our plywood sub-roadbed and our box frame. Now I can take the whole thing back to the studio, and we'll lay some cork on top of this for laying track on, and put some 1-inch polystyrene foam here in the middle for our town structures. Here we go. I think that'll work. Now I want to cut a piece of pink polystyrene foam to cover this opening here, and this is where the town's going to go. So I need a blank, looks like about 16 by 34. Well, here's a 16-inch wide piece that I snapped off of a 4x8 sheet of some 1-inch pink polystyrene foam insulation. Measure this out to 34 inches. Best way to make straight cuts like this is the old score and snap method. Just take my utility knife, cut down about halfway through that, and I can just snap that off just like that. I've adjusted my bar compass here to an 8-inch radius. Now I can trim that part off. It should fit this curve really nicely. On this curve, we'll use the hot wire cutter. I'm going to do some more trimming on this, ease this edge here and all that. But before I do, I'm going to set the town structures on here again, outline them one more time, and that way I'll know exactly where everything will fit and where I can remove material safely and where I want to leave it to have a solid base for the structures to sit on. Okay, I think that's pretty darn close. These are the final positions, pretty much, so I want to make sure I get them right. Now I can decide where I can trim this. Main thing I want to do is kind of ease this edge down so it's a little bit of a slope. In some places there'll be retaining walls where they're needed, but this is just kind of on the front side anyway. It's going to slope down towards the track level. And I'll do the rest of the shaping on this with a sanding block just to ease that edge down there. Make it pretty smooth. These Scotch foam sanding blocks are great for this kind of thing, shaping foam like this. You can contour it to the shape you're making here. Okay, I think I've about got that. But before I glue it into place, I want to add some bracing underneath. And that's just because, these structures are a little heavy. They're mostly plaster, except for the mission. So I want to have that well supported. As usual, my preferred glue for working with foam like this is this Loctite Power Grab adhesive, all-purpose. Grabs so nicely. Yeah, perfect. And sometimes this wants to come up a little bit. Sometimes the foam could be a little curved. That's easy to fix. Just a couple of drywall screws. Clamp it in place, going right down into the plywood. And these screw holes will get completely hidden by scenery materials later on. Now, on Verne's original Estrella and Sonora Grande layout, he didn't have, like traditional raised roadbed. It looked like the track was laid right on the ground because he wanted to evoke the feeling of a, funky, down in the weeds, border country narrow gauge line, which he did very well. So I'm not going to use like a raised cork roadbed. Instead, I've got these 12 by 12 corkboard tiles. So that way I get, the sound deadening qualities of cork roadbed, but without the look of a raised roadbed. It's going to look like the track has been laid right down in the dirt. And this stuff I'm going to put into place with some good old tight bond wood glue. So make sure I get a nice even coat on here. Hold this in place while the glue dries. I'll just use some push pins. All right, I'm gonna let that glue dry overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow and see how we did. Well, the glue is dry now, and I just got done removing all of the push pins. I'm just going along the edge here with my utility knife, adding just a little bit of a slope there, I guess, where it meets the plywood. I want to take my sanding block and round that off a little bit more just to ease that transition. I'm going to go around all of these places where the joints are, make sure it's nice and smooth for track laying. This will just take a minute. Well, so far so good. I put all these structures and the figures and a lot of the details back into place here just so I can visualize how things are coming together, and so far I'm pretty happy with it. Obviously there are a lot of things that need to happen before I start gluing stuff down. There's lighting to add to all these structures. I've got the track and the wiring to install. This is going to be a digital command control DCC layout, so I've got all that to do. There's a complete sound system to add. The original San Lorenzo diorama had a sound system from Jim Wells over at Finalizing Engineering. You might remember Jim. He also did the sound for my Gruesome Gulch layout and for the Bandit Canyon Railway. Well, I have that complete sound system from the original diorama, and we're going to be reinstalling all of that down underneath the deck here. A couple of new speakers. Got a lot of scenery to build. And I think I've been looking at this, and I think it needs a backdrop too, don't you? I think maybe a blue sky backdrop with some desert hills back there, some saguaro dotted hills. I think that would look pretty nice. So a lot of different projects to do going forward. But before we sign off today, there's a couple other things I wanted to show you. In addition to the original San Lorenzo diorama, I also have two of Verne's locomotives from the Estrella Sonora Grande. I forgot to mention those at the top of the video, but let's take a look at them now. I have the number 2 and the number 3, the Rattler. And these are both Bachmann Porters, at least that's how they started out. But Verne did a lot of work on these. In addition to the paint and the details, he also added Keep Alive capacitors. These are sound-equipped locomotives, so the Keep Alives really help them to run better, especially on, dirty track and over turnouts and things like that. I've run them for years on the Thunder Mesa layout, and they run amazingly well. Really looking forward to having them here on the new San Lorenzo mini layout. Obviously, I need a train for them to pull too. I don't have any Estrella Sonora Grande cars, so I'm going to have to put something together. But that sounds like another fun project for another day. But today, we're about out of time. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please hit like, because it really does help with the algorithm. If it's your first time here, I hope you will subscribe and hit the notification bell so YouTube will let you know when the next video is coming from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow us over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and check out the resources available on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge shout out and big thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.